you think Meghan Markle was even open to something romantic with Piers Morgan?
She was meeting with Piers Morgan for, I believe, reasons beyond being friends.
It started with a drink in a quiet London pub. One night, one meeting, and a question that still hangs in the air. Why was Meghan Markle sitting across from Piers Morgan in the summer of 2016?
Because you were dealing with someone with that level of ambition. And P. Diner, it was actually back in 2019. And in some ways, I guess I find it frustrating that I still don't think people truly understand what Meghan was doing before she met Harry.
To the casual eye, it looked harmless. She was an actress from Suits, he was a well-known media personality, two people sharing stories, maybe even laughing over a pint. But when you trace Meghan's path in those years, that simple evening begins to look less like coincidence and more like a carefully placed move in a much bigger game. Because here's the truth, Meghan wasn't just in London to enjoy the city. She had already been telling friends that she was ready for a British man. Not just anyone, but someone who could elevate her profile. Around that same time, she was reaching out to singers, footballers, and socialites, swapping messages and testing connections. The Piers Morgan pub meeting didn't happen in isolation. It was part of a pattern, one that shows Meghan was actively building the network she thought could push her into the spotlight she craved. And what makes the whole thing even more fascinating? Within weeks of that pint with Piers, Meghan was suddenly linked to Prince Harry. Piers himself admitted she never contacted him again. Ghosted, just like others who later said they'd been dropped once Meghan no longer needed them. So the question lingers, was that night with Piers about friendship, or was it another strategic step on the road to royalty? That's where the story really begins. July 2016. Wimbledon had just wrapped, and Meghan Markle, then still best known as Rachel Zane from Suits, was in London. Through Twitter exchanges, she had struck up a friendly connection with Piers Morgan. According to him, she sent a message suggesting they meet for drinks, and so they did. At the Scarsdale Tavern, a quiet Kensington pub. By all accounts, the evening was light, chatty, even fun. Piers recalls that they laughed, swapped stories, and got along well. When the night wound down, Meghan climbed into a cab, thanked him, and disappeared into the London night. What Piers didn't know at that moment was that he would never hear from her again. The texts stopped. The Twitter exchanges went silent. By the time he looked up, she was dating Prince Harry. That abrupt cutoff is what makes the meeting so intriguing. If it was truly just a casual drink, why vanish so suddenly? Why erase a budding friendship within days? To Piers, the answer was clear. He'd been ghosted. To Meghan's critics, it looked like a calculated move. The pub meet was useful for as long as it lasted, but once a bigger opportunity appeared, she no longer needed it. Placed on its own, that night could be brushed off as an awkward end to a short-lived friendship. But when stacked alongside Meghan's other connections in the same period, footballers, boy band singers, socialites, the pub meeting begins to look less random. It was one tile in a mosaic of carefully chosen relationships that just happened to peak with the ultimate catch, a prince. And if you think that sounds strategic, just wait until you see how wide she was really casting her net. If there's one detail that puts the Piers Morgan pub meeting into perspective, it's what Meghan herself was saying at the time. Friends, journalists, even fellow socialites recall that she wasn't shy about what she wanted. She was looking for a British man. Not just any man, but someone with influence, fame, or connections that could help open doors. Katie Hind, a well-known showbiz columnist, remembers Meghan being direct during a London meetup. She had just finalized her divorce and was single and ready to mingle, but American men didn't interest her. She wanted someone British. Socialite Lizzie Cundy tells a similar story. Meghan had confided in her about wanting to meet a famous British guy and even asked for introductions. At first, Lizzie obliged, thinking she was helping a new friend navigate London's glamorous social circles. But that friendship, like so many others, would later end abruptly once Meghan's path shifted. Around this same period, she was quietly reaching out to British names through social media. Football star Ashley Cole, still one of the most talked about athletes of the era, was said to be on her radar. Musicians and television personalities cropped up in the whispers too. It was less about romance in the traditional sense and more about positioning. Who could help her stand out in a crowded industry and accelerate her transition from cable TV actress to international figure? So when you view the Piers Morgan meeting through this lens, it feels less like a quirky chance encounter and more like a strategic stop on a much larger tour. Meghan wasn't drifting, she was scouting, and she made sure people knew exactly what she was looking for. But talking about it is one thing. Her inbox tells the real story. Behind the scenes, Meghan wasn't just making connections over cocktails. She was active online too. By 2015, long before Harry was in the picture, she was reaching out to well-known British names through Twitter and Instagram, laying digital breadcrumbs that revealed exactly where her focus was. One of the clearest examples came with X Factor winner Matt Cardle. At the time, Cardle was riding high off his success in the West End musical Memphis. Out of the blue, he received a follow from Meghan Markle. Flattered, he followed her back, only to be surprised when she slid into his messages. She told him she admired his work, hinted at meeting up, and kept the tone friendly but personal. According to those close to Matt, he was stunned that a Hollywood actress knew who he was. For a brief moment, it looked like sparks might fly, but timing got in the way. He soon started dating someone else, and Meghan's last message went unanswered. That connection fizzled before it ever left the screen. Then came Max George of boy band The Wanted, one of the UK's most popular acts at the time. Reports suggest Meghan also exchanged messages with him around the same period. He later admitted she'd reached out, though nothing serious came of it. Still, it shows a consistent pattern. She was testing multiple doors, waiting to see which one would open. Taken alone, each of these exchanges might seem trivial, but stacked together, they paint a striking picture. Meghan wasn't leaving her future to chance. She was casting a wide net, chatting, connecting, and lining up possibilities in the UK entertainment scene. And those digital conversations were just the start. Offline, the friendships she built tell an even sharper story.
As this is all starting to fall apart, trust me, if a better option comes along that is going to give her a life that she considers more comfortable, she will go for it.
If Meghan's online reach-outs showed how eager she was to connect, her real-life friendships revealed what happened when those connections no longer served her. Several women in the London social scene have said the same thing. Meghan could be charming at first, but once she had what she needed, she would disappear. Take Millie McIntosh, star of Made in Chelsea. Meghan reportedly leaned on her when she first started spending more time in London. Millie offered advice, introduced her to places, and gave her a glimpse of high society circles. But the moment Meghan's relationship with Harry went public in 2016, Millie says the friendship ended abruptly. Texts went unanswered. Invitations were ignored. Years later, Millie openly admitted she felt ghosted and dismissed once Meghan no longer needed the connection. Lizzie Cundy tells a nearly identical story. The former model and presenter says Meghan confided in her about wanting a famous British man. Lizzie, thinking she was helping, introduced Meghan to people in her network. But just like with Millie, the friendship stopped dead once Harry appeared. Lizzie has since said Meghan dropped her like a hot brick. What makes these accounts so striking is the consistency. Two women, from different backgrounds, both describing the same pattern, warmth and charm in the beginning, followed by silence once Meghan's path shifted upward. And of course, Piers Morgan claims the same happened to him after their pub meeting. These stories don't just reveal personal fallout, they underline the bigger theme. Meghan's network building wasn't about long-term bonds or loyalty. It was about advancement. Once the next step appeared, the past was left behind. And that theme brings us right back to the pub night.
When I discovered that actually her attempts to meet a British man had gone into overdrive. But I started to hear that there was so much more going on.
So let's circle back to that July night in the Scarsdale Tavern. Meghan had been in London for days, making introductions, reaching out to celebrities, and openly telling people she was looking for a British man. Then came Piers Morgan, a seasoned broadcaster with deep ties in the UK press. On paper, it was the perfect connection.
Do you think Meghan Markle was even open to something romantic with Piers Morgan? I mean, he is obviously a happily married man with Celia Walden, but why did she go to meet him for that date at the pub?
I think any relationship that Meghan pursues is intended to be more than a friendship because she's trying to get something out of this relationship to help her. So of course, in the beginning, she was meeting with Piers Morgan for, I believe, reasons beyond being friends. Of course, that's the intention. Why else meet with the man, right? She's using her sexuality to get what she wants.
But here's the question that nobody seems willing to ask directly. Was Meghan's meeting with Piers ever really about friendship, or was she leaving the door open to something more? Piers himself has admitted he thought they hit it off. They traded laughs, shared stories, and enjoyed what seemed like genuine chemistry. For Meghan, though, every encounter in that era seems to have carried a dual purpose: personal charm mixed with professional advantage. Critics argue this was her pattern. With Matt Cardle, it started friendly but carried undertones of more. With Max George, it was flirty messages that never went further. With Piers, some say the same playbook was in motion. Make the connection, keep it warm, and if romance wasn't on the cards, at least secure a valuable ally in the media. But Meghan never followed up. No texts, no second meeting, just silence. And that's where the theory splits in two. Either she realized there was no upside to pursuing anything more with Piers, or she already had her sights on something bigger and didn't need him anymore. Whichever way you read it, the pub meeting becomes less about what happened in those 2 hours and more about what didn't happen after. And what followed next makes the timing even harder to ignore. For Piers Morgan, the silence was deafening. One evening of drinks and chatter, then nothing. No replies, no calls, no follow-ups. He's been blunt about it ever since. Meghan ghosted him. And the timing could not have been sharper. Within days of that pub night, Meghan was suddenly linked to Prince Harry. The world shifted, and Piers was left in the dust. To him, the sequence was almost comical. One minute, he was waving her into a black cab, thinking they'd struck up a new friendship. The next, he was reading headlines about her being seen with a royal. He said it before, and he'll say it again. Meghan used him as a stepping stone, and once she reached a higher rung, she climbed on without looking back. And Piers wasn't alone in feeling discarded. Millie McIntosh, Lizzie Cundy, even casual acquaintances echoed the same story. Meghan was warm, charming, and eager to connect until something better came along. Then, silence? It was a pattern of convenience. Connections were built quickly and abandoned just as fast once they'd served their purpose. Looking at it this way, the Piers Morgan episode wasn't an outlier. It was part of the broader script. Meghan didn't ghost him because of some personal slight. She ghosted him because she didn't need him anymore. By then, she had landed the introduction that would change her life. And this is what makes the pub night so fascinating. In hindsight, it wasn't about Piers, it was about positioning. She didn't walk out of that cab ride alone. She walked into the next phase of her plan. When you strip away the small talk and the pub setting, the Piers Morgan meetup starts to look less like a casual drink and more like a calculated move. Meghan was in the middle of what could only be called her British chapter. She was messaging singers, asking about footballers, leaning on socialites, and telling journalists she wanted a man from the UK. Piers fit neatly into that framework, not necessarily as a romantic prospect, but as a high-value connection in the heart of British media. Think about what he represented at the time: a powerful platform, a web of press contacts, and a reputation for putting people on the map. Sitting across from him wasn't just about sipping wine, it was about access. If something more personal had developed, perhaps that would have been a bonus. But the primary benefit was visibility. Piers was an influencer before the word was even fashionable, and Meghan was smart enough to know that. That's why so many critics now argue the real reason she sought him out was leverage. By meeting Piers, she positioned herself inside the very circle she wanted to penetrate, London's media elite. And once a bigger opportunity appeared, she didn't hesitate to let the connection die. Was she open to romance? Maybe. Was she playing the friendship card? Absolutely. But underneath it all, the motive seems clear. She wasn't chasing companionship, she was chasing elevation. Prestige was never the destination, he was just another stepping stone on the way to something bigger. And when you see it through that lens, her later moves with Harry don't look like a fairy tale beginning. They look like the logical endgame of a strategy, years in the making. When you step back and look at the pattern, the night in that Kensington pub stops being a quirky footnote and becomes a symbol. Meghan Markle's path was never random. Every message, every friendship, every carefully chosen meeting was a move on the board. She wasn't wandering into connections by chance. She was stacking them one on top of the other until she reached the summit. The Piers Morgan meeting is a perfect snapshot of that mindset. On the surface, it was two people swapping stories over drinks. Beneath the surface, it was a calculated test. What could this relationship offer, and was it worth pursuing? When the answer shifted, so did Meghan. No goodbye, no lingering loyalty, just silence. The same silence that Millie McIntosh, Lizzie Cundy, and others said they experienced when they were no longer useful to her rise. And that's why her past matters. It's not just gossip about who she texted or where she went. It's a window into how she thinks and how she moves. A woman who always had her sights set higher, who never stopped scanning the horizon for the next rung on the ladder. Today, Meghan presents herself as a philanthropist, a humanitarian, a woman driven by causes bigger than herself. But the echoes of her early years still hang in the background. Was she ever really open to romance with Piers Morgan? Or was that night always about leverage? We may never get the answer from Meghan herself, but the pattern speaks volumes, and the question lingers. If the pub meeting was just another stepping stone, what happens if an even higher one appears again?